Several U.S. state governments are about to murder American citizens using taxpayer money. And no, I don't mean murder indirectly in the way that they usually do, like with abortion bans, lax gun laws, or crappy public health policies. I'm talking about murder in about as direct way as it's possible to murder a person by knowingly and intentionally injecting them with poison. That's right, we're talking about the death penalty today, a fun topic that everybody loves discussing. As you may already guess, I am vehemently opposed to the death penalty for pretty much every reason it's possible to oppose it. For instance, I think it is immoral to murder someone who's not an immediate threat to your own life, regardless of what that person has done in the past. But I've found that morality is rarely an argument that will actually persuade anyone of anything, whether that's eating meat or providing universal health care or state-sanctioned murder in this case. Luckily, there are several other reasons I oppose the death penalty that might be more persuasive. For instance, if I'm talking to a libertarian, I might point out that contrary to popular belief, the death penalty costs the taxpayer more money than a sentence of life in prison. One analysis in 2016 found that each death penalty inmate is approximately $1.12 million in 2015 dollars more than a general population inmate, with those costs expected to increase due to the settling of lawsuits related to botched executions and the increasing cost of the required chemicals from companies unwilling to manufacture a product specifically to kill someone. That's right. Apparently there are some companies that are run by people who aren't sociopaths. Fascinating. Let's study those people one day. I might also point out that contrary to popular opinion, there is no evidence that the death penalty reduces crime in any way. One study reviewed the existing data on executions across Canada and the United States, comparing the number of homicides in places where executions were legal with places where it isn't. They found that the relative rarity of executions made it impossible to detect any real effect on homicides, concluding that there's not just reasonable doubt about whether there is any deterrent effect of the death penalty, but profound uncertainty. Not only that, but thanks to the aforementioned higher cost of the death penalty, it may actually lead to an increase in crime. This study from 2019 found that in Texas, executions are funded at the county level, leading to those governments raising money to pay for these executions by increasing property tax and decreasing public safety measures, which leads directly to an increase in property crime in those counties. The irony. While I do think that all of those arguments against the death penalty are very persuasive, the most convincing is this. The American justice system is heavily flawed, and it is a statistical inevitability that we will purposely and knowingly execute a person who has not committed any crime at all. In 2014, researchers conducted a statistical analysis that found that if all death sentence defendants remained under sentence of death indefinitely, at least 4.1% would be exonerated. We conclude that this is a conservative estimate of the proportion of false conviction among death sentences in the United States. While often it's hard to definitively prove that an executed person was actually innocent, there have been several cases where we know well beyond reasonable doubt. For instance, Johnny Frank Garrett was executed in Texas in 1992 for supposedly raping and murdering a nun when he was 17 years old, and his arrest and conviction was based in part on a report from a local psychic named Bubbles. Yes, really. But DNA evidence tested 22 years later found that the actual culprit was a man named Leoncio Perez Rueda, who was convicted of murdering another elderly woman 4 months before the murder of the nun in the same area. Here's another example, also from Texas. In 2003, Robert Robertson was convicted of murdering his 2-year-old daughter after he rushed her lifeless body to the hospital, and doctors there determined that she was a victim of shaken baby syndrome, or SBS. Here's the trouble: shaken baby syndrome does not exist. I know, it really seems like it does because we've seen so many awful, abusive parents and babysitters and caregivers prosecuted for shaken baby syndrome. But the fact of the matter is that there is absolutely no scientific evidence for it being real. Starting in the 1970s, doctors started coming up with this idea of shaken baby syndrome as the best way they could think of to explain the deaths of children who showed no outward signs of abuse and yet who suffered retinal bleeding, bleeding in the protective layer of the brain, and brain swelling. But in the decades since then, a large body of research has been published showing that it's much more likely these deaths were caused by an earlier injury like a fall that seemed mild because the kid in question seemed fine immediately afterwards, a so-called lucid interval that can last for several days. As Professor Deborah Turkheimer, then of DePaul University College of Law, wrote in her extensive review of the literature in 2009, a number of medical disorders documented in the medical peer-reviewed literature can mimic abusive head trauma, including congenital malformations, metabolic disorders, hematological diseases, infectious diseases, and autoimmune conditions. In some, depending upon the clinical picture presented, the differential diagnosis for symptoms previously associated exclusively with shaken baby syndrome now contemplates a wide range of non-traumatic possibilities: medical or surgical interventions, prenatal, perinatal, and pregnancy-related conditions, birth effects, infections, diseases, disorders, malformations, post-vaccinal conditions, rebleeds, and hypoxia, lack of oxygen to the brain. In Robert Robertson's case, his 2-year-old daughter had actually been violently ill the week prior to her death, prompting her father to take her to the doctor twice. Both times, she was prescribed Phenergan, a drug that the FDA now mandates carry a black box warning to not prescribe to children aged 2 and under. They also prescribed her codeine, which, also is no longer recommended for toddlers due to its ability to restrict breathing and kill. 2 nights after that final doctor's visit, Robertson woke up in the morning to find his daughter blue and not breathing. The toxicology report found lethal levels of Phenergan in her system. Despite this, the doctor at the hospital saw that she had 2 of the 3 signs of shaken baby syndrome and gave her that diagnosis, which made its way all the way through the court system without anyone pointing out that shaken baby syndrome doesn't actually exist. Oh, also the conviction rested in part on Robertson's apparent lack of emotional reaction to the death of his child. Robertson is autistic. This is just the junk science of 911 call analysis in a slightly altered form. You didn't react the way I react, so you must be guilty. All of this suggests to me not just reasonable doubt. Like, remember when I discussed the evidence for and against Lucy Letby, and I landed on not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and say it. Robertson is innocent. He did not abuse or murder his daughter. There is some good news, though. While it's too late for people like Johnny Frank Garrett, it is not too late for Robert Robertson, at least as of the time I'm recording this. In 1 month, the state of Texas will execute him based upon a pseudoscientific lie. The Innocence Project is trying to prevent this travesty from happening, and you can head to their website to sign their petition. If you live in Texas, you should call your good-for-nothing governor to tell him to stop being such a stupid piece of shit and exonerate this innocent man already. I led with that story because it's so plainly obvious that Robinson is innocent, but I will end by also suggesting that you read up on the case of Marcellus Williams. The state of Missouri is set to murder him in just 5 days from the day I'm publishing this video, and it's quite likely that he is also not guilty. He was convicted in 2001 of stabbing a woman to death in the course of a home burglary, but his DNA was not found on the scene. Someone else's DNA was found on the scene. Police mishandled evidence. The people who said he did it made off with thousands of dollars in reward money. At least one juror was removed from the trial because they were black, and even state prosecutors say that there's overwhelming evidence his trial was unfair. The former governor of Missouri agreed with that, staying the execution and convening a panel to go over the evidence. However, before they could finish, a new governor got into office and ended up disbanding the panel before they were able to render any verdict. And he rescheduled the execution because he's a bloodthirsty ghoul. I'm sorry, I mean a Republican. Is Williams innocent? I don't know. But I do know that he shouldn't be executed by the state of Missouri for any one of the many reasons I've listed. It costs the taxpayers more money. It does not stop people from murdering each other. It may increase crime. He may be not guilty. And yeah, It's immoral to kill people. There, I said it. To annoy the shit out of your garbage governor to the point that it becomes less stressful for him to simply decide to not kill a man. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.